Some people leave your life quietly, but some leave a wound so deep it never fully closes. Daniel thought he had moved on. He thought he was ready. But the moment he walked through those hospital doors, he realized he had never stopped loving her at all. Subscribe to Soul of Kindness for more heart-touching stories. The call came at 2:47 in the morning. Daniel was sitting at his kitchen table, unable to sleep, staring at a half-empty cup of cold coffee. He had been doing that a lot lately, sitting in the dark, thinking about nothing and everything at the same time. His apartment was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that reminds you just how alone you really are. When his phone buzzed, he almost didn't answer. The number was unfamiliar, but something made him pick it up. "Is this Daniel Carter?" a woman's voice said on the other end, calm, professional, a nurse's voice. "Yes," he said slowly. "Who is this?" "I'm calling from Mercy General Hospital. We found your name listed as an emergency contact for a patient named Claire Carter. She was brought in about an hour ago." Daniel stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. Claire. He hadn't heard her name spoken out loud in almost 3 years. Not since the divorce was finalized. Not since she handed him back the key to their apartment and walked away without turning around. "What happened?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "She collapsed at home. We're still running tests, but her condition is serious. Is there anyone else we should contact?" Daniel closed his eyes. "No," he said quietly. "There's no one else." He grabbed his jacket and his keys and drove to the hospital without even thinking. His hands moved on their own. His heart moved on its own, too. The emergency room was bright and loud, full of the kind of noise that only exists in places where people are fighting to survive. Daniel walked to the front desk and told them who he was there for. A nurse with kind eyes led him down a long hallway and stopped, outside a room with a closed door. "She's stable for now," the nurse said softly, "but the doctor will need to speak with you soon." "Can I see her?" Daniel asked. The nurse hesitated. "She did ask for you," she said, as if that surprised her. "She woke up for a few minutes, and the first name she said was yours." That stopped him cold. He pushed open the door slowly and stepped inside. Claire was lying in the hospital bed, connected to 2 different monitors, an IV line running into her right arm. Her dark hair was spread across the pillow. She looked smaller than he remembered, fragile in a way she never was when they were together. Claire had always been strong, stubborn, fierce, unbreakable. Seeing her like this felt like the world had been turned upside down. Her eyes were closed. He pulled a chair close and sat beside her, not saying a word. And then, very quietly, she said his name. "Daniel." Her voice was rough, barely there, like something worn down by too much weight. "I'm here," he said. "I'm right here." She didn't open her eyes, but her hand moved slowly across the blanket until it found his, and she held on. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Daniel sat there in the low light of that hospital room, holding his ex-wife's hand, listening to the soft beeping of the monitors, and trying very hard not to fall apart. 3 years. They had been apart for 3 years, and yet sitting there, it felt like no time had passed at all. It also felt like a lifetime. He thought about the day they met. She had been 24, working double shifts at a small diner while studying for her nursing degree. He had come in every Saturday morning for 3 months just to talk to her. She used to tease him about it, told him she had tipped herself in his name because he spent more time talking than eating. He had laughed so hard that day. He hadn't laughed like that in a very long time. They got married when she was 27. The wedding was small, just close friends, a garden, and fairy lights strung between old oak trees. She wore her mother's earrings. He cried before she even made it to the altar. It was the happiest day of his life. And then slowly, quietly, everything fell apart. Not from one big moment. Not from a single fight or a single mistake. It unraveled thread by thread. He worked too much. She carried too much alone. They stopped talking the way they used to. They stopped seeing each other, even when they were in the same room. And one evening, Claire sat down across from him at the dinner table and said, very calmly, "Daniel, I think we've both been pretending for a while now. He hadn't argued. That was the part that still haunted him. He hadn't argued. Now, sitting beside her hospital bed, he wondered if that silence had been the biggest mistake of his life. Claire woke up fully around 5 in the morning. She turned her head slowly and looked at him. Really looked at him. And for a moment, neither of them knew what to say. There was too much between them. Too many unsaid things piled up over too many years. "You came," she said finally. "Of course I came," Daniel said. "You were still listed as my emergency contact." The corner of her mouth curved slightly. "I know," she said. "I never changed it." He looked at her carefully. "Why not?" She was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," she said softly. "Maybe I just wasn't ready to fully let go of everything." Daniel leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. "Claire, what happened?" "The nurse said you collapsed." She looked away toward the window where the early morning sky was turning a soft grey. "I've been sick for a while," she said. "I didn't want to make it a big thing." "How long?" he asked. She hesitated. "About a year." Daniel felt something cold move through his chest. "A year," he repeated slowly. "Claire?" "I'm handling it," she said, and the old firmness was back in her voice. That familiar wall going up? He had seen it 1,000 times. She would let him in just far enough, and then the door would close. "Who's been with you through this?" he asked. "Who's been helping you?" She didn't answer right away, and in that silence Daniel got his answer. No one. She had been going through it alone. The doctor came in at 7 and spoke to both of them together. Claire didn't stop him from staying in the room. That meant something, Daniel thought. That meant something. The diagnosis was serious. Her heart, a condition that had been developing quietly for years, undetected, working against her while she smiled, and worked and lived her life as if everything was fine. Surgery was needed, soon. After the doctor left, the room was very still. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Daniel asked. "Who was I supposed to tell?" Claire said, her voice flat but her eyes were wet. "Me," he said simply. "You could have told me." She laughed, a small broken sound. "Daniel, we're divorced. I couldn't call you every time something went wrong. That's not fair to you." "Claire." He stood up and walked to the window, then turned back to face her. "Do you know what the worst part of losing you was? It wasn't the empty apartment. It wasn't the quiet. It was knowing that somewhere out there you were dealing with things alone, and I wasn't allowed to be there anymore." She stared at him. Something shifted in her expression. The wall cracked just slightly. "You always did that," she whispered. "Did what?" "Said the exact right thing too late." It landed like a stone in still water. He felt the ripple of it all the way through. "Then let me say it now," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, Claire. I'm sorry for every moment I chose work over you, for every time I let the silence sit between us instead of breaking it. I'm sorry it took something like this for me to be back in this room with you." She was crying now, quietly, the way she always cried, like she was trying not to. "I'm scared," she admitted, and he knew how much it cost her to say those 2 words. Claire did not say she was scared, not ever. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of her bed and said, "Then I'll stay. For as long as you need me, I'll stay." He didn't leave. For 3 days, Daniel barely left the hospital. He went home once to change clothes, once to grab her a book she mentioned, Loving, a worn paperback about a woman who travels the world alone and finds herself along the way. He had remembered her mentioning it years ago. She looked at him when he handed it to her and didn't say anything for a long moment. "You remembered," she said. "I remember everything," he replied quietly. Her sister flew in from Denver on the 2nd day. Her name was Mara, sharp-eyed and protective, someone who had always been a little suspicious of Daniel, even during the good years. She walked into the hospital room, saw him sitting beside Claire's bed, and stopped in the doorway. "You're here," Mara said, not accusingly, just surprised.